So, for the benefit of those that are watching or listening, I'd like to welcome you. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself briefly. But unusually, at the start of this, you just did a little exercise before I pressed record to utilize some of the work that you do for your own benefit. And I think what better place to start initially than for you to tell me about what you just did.
Okay. Morning, Claire. Thank you for today. And it's a journey. So what did I do? I did two things. I acknowledged my anxieties and humanness of being under the spotlight, my frailties, my idiosyncrasies of whatever form. I babbled them at one level. I little breath at the end. The breath for me then enabled this sort of right from my throat right down to the central part of my stomach to just go almost like, oh, thank God for that. And then I just took a moment to center myself from probably a different place within myself, and that was just closed my eyes and took a breath from a different place. And I guess in simple form that what I've done is bring two parts of myself into some sort of homeostasis, some balance where I am able to be with you in an authentic way.
Brilliant. I love that. So I'm going to confess to watchers, we already know each other somewhat. We work together as part of the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. So that may or may not become obvious as I go through the interview with you. So I just thought if we mention that at the beginning, then for anybody reading and watching and listening, that will just, again, in the interest of being authentic and open. And so I'm going to say, tell me a little bit about the work you're doing. I know you don't only do stuff with the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. So let's have a little introduction of who you are, where you're based, and what you're doing these days.
Well, I'll try and keep it simple. So, hello, my name is Craig Rebuck. I am a father and stepfather. I am a grandfather, and I am a practitioner of numerous different modalities. My interest is in mind, body, and spirit. And I have been on a journey since my mid-20s, following and learning and gathering and sowing seeds at the same time. Gathering information and sowing information that will come back later on. I'm a trustee of two charities. One is the Sylvan Healing Sanctuary. The other is the Confederation of Healing Organizations. Somehow or another, I stuck my hand up, found myself to have my feet in two camps. The practices and the work that I do interest me in the context that, in the classic term, I'm a spiritual healer. What does that mean? It's such a big, it's two little words, and it means so much, and has so much confusion and complexity. There isn't a religious connotation to it. Spiritual for me means a searching, a connection, an authenticity, an otherworldly, a beyond where we're at. The healer is probably in my early days, I would have thought that was a bit of a role of responsibility, which it is. And people would come to a healer to be made better, or feel well, or find solutions. But as the years have gone on, I think that is not a helpful terminology. One goes to a healer to, in my sense, support you in finding who you are, where you're at, what's going on, deal with all life traumas, and find the way to advance yourself on the journey of life. Why the mind and body? Well, we can all have a spiritual practice in many forms, and going to church, mosque, synagogue, standing in the middle of a field are all part of the principles that one can have of looking beyond ourself, and I think is really valuable. Meditation is brilliant for that. Yoga, Pilates, they're all about how to be within ourselves, I think. But I also think we need to do our kitchen work, our homework, and that is take care of our body, be in nature, feel, stretch, lengthen, walk, run, whatever it is that is enabling our body to be in a comfortable place. So I became interested in the Feldenkrais method. And Moshe Feldenkrais was a physicist, helped to develop a sonar radar in the Second World War, but he was also a black belt judo specialist, and really weird combination of the two things. And he used his scientific brain to analyze and understand how we move in our physical self at a structural and at a musculature level, and started talking about neuroplasticity 50 years ago when people weren't even talking about it. So how do we live in our bodies? And then finally, the therapeutic journey, the psychological. I did some counseling training, but felt that it wasn't quite the direction that I wanted to go, and where I was in my life at the time, it wasn't appropriate for me to continue that. But it gave me an understanding that, our thoughts have a huge responsibility to what goes on in our bodies. I work from home at some time. I work online, and I work in the healing center in Winchmore Hill as a mixture. Find a combination of working on our website to bring more information to people. Yeah, I think that's probably a good potted history of what's going on.
So what do I need to know about in his 20s, Craig, and that moment of change? There's two things that come into my mind. One is, what can I learn about you from then that shows me who you are now? The other thing is, why do you think the change happened for you? Because I know there's plenty of people that when they're younger, they go through something traumatic, and not everybody has the kind of experience that you did. So tell me about 20s Craig.
Yeah, I think 20s Craig was influenced by familial responsibility, and the growing up in an ethnic minority community of one has to drive, push, get down the route of career and house and 2.2 children and all the things that went on in early 80s London, so to speak, although it was quite an interesting and very vibrant time. But I think to answer your question in the simplest form is that early Craig in 20s didn't understand that the traumatic events and experiences that he went through would have a repercussion, and didn't understand the getting on the treadmill and doing what we're supposed to do was also about experimentation. So I probably smoked more weed than I should have done. And it was an avoidance. I was avoiding the difficulties and complexities of watching my family, my father got cancer when I was 9, and watching him die, and that going through that process. He died when I was 17. And then I just thought, hey, I had a job and I had responsibilities, and I had to take over, carry on the family responsibilities and roles. And in the end, the fuses blew. Even I used the adage at the time, if you burn the candle at both ends, in the end, it might meet in the middle. And it did. So I had a psychotic episode, which was probably internally humiliating. I was humiliating that I was frail, I was human. But within the eye of the storm, I would say that there was an incredible calmness and also an epiphany of something which I didn't really know very much about, didn't know what it was. Well, at the time I didn't. And when the dust settled and the medication stopped and the path is in front of me, it was, well, I still need to do that. But there's something else, there's something more. And I spent probably the next 12 years finding out what the more was, at the same time as being on the path of wife, kids, responsibility, job, career, and all those things. But felt that there was an interesting other path that I wanted to know more about.
Where did that feeling come from?
It's a really nice question. I mean it in a not in I'm buying time type of answer, because I don't think it's an easy question to answer. And what I've done is I've gone into my body and I've probably gone, it was in the pit of my stomach. There's a knowing here, there's a feeling here, and there's a feeling here, but they're quite separate, they're quite distant, in our body, but actually they're not. They're actually very linked and connected. The bit about the neural pathways interests me quite a lot. So I suppose I forgot to add that I'm doing a master's in body psychotherapy, body psychology, in order to know a little bit more about how all our feelings actually interact in our physical self and how we can work with that. So the vagus nerve is a very interesting nerve in our system, and how it impacts and how our stress relates to so much of our system. So it's a feeling. I think the answer to it is it's a feeling that was from outside of my body, that was in me, that I needed to tend to as I would a garden. It takes time.
Did you feel at that time that there was kind of an intuition of the direction you was going to go in, or were you just exploring?
So the first part of the journey, and it's quite, for me, it's I've always seemed to have done things backwards. So I did the spiritual part first, the sort of non-tangible, esoteric, connecting. A friend of mine had talked about his father being in a spiritual development practice, and he said, "Your name is mentioned," and I went, "Well, okay, don't know what that means." And 10 years later, I contacted the father after the storm had settled and said, "This is what your son said. Can you give me some advice?" So he asked me a couple of questions, and he sent me to see a lady that was running a healing center in Southgate, and I'm still there. Well, she isn't. Well, she isn't. And I've been involved in working at that level ever since. It opened a door for me to have a meaningful connection. Maybe that was the one that worked for me. It could be for other people that it would be something else, but for me that was right. It said, well, it enabled me to be interested in the intangible, the can't see it, can't smell it, can't touch it, can't feel it, can't hear it, and yet all those things are going on, but not in this self. And finding the language, finding an experience, validating the experiences and the thoughts.
So tell me a little bit about some of your early explorations with spirituality then, for you.
I think I tried to find it within religion. And sort of I looked at the variation as to whether or not the religious practices were what I was looking for. And I still go in and out of churches and synagogues and places, even mosques, and they go, "Yep, it's here. no, it's not in that one. Yep, that's it. And you can feel it. You can sit in it, and it doesn't matter which one it is. I mean, they're all house of. And I'm going to use the God word, but it doesn't matter because it's formalized religion. But it is about the energetic connection that's within that space. And I think I became very interested in some aspects of it, but didn't like the formalized organizational aspect that was do this, do that, think like this, be like that. But formal prayer is really just a meditative variation, and for people it works. So that's great. It didn't work for me. I didn't. I just I felt like I was swimming in the wrong pond. So I needed to find another pond. I think I spent a lot of. It was a very busy time in my life, bringing up young children. It's hard to give time to. Excuse me, the commitment to do voluntary work, and it was voluntary work. But I found a way of bit by bit, just learning, listening, feeling. I didn't do any reading. I wasn't interested in learning other people's viewpoints. I wanted to find out for myself what it was about. I wanted my subjective experience rather than other people's intention. And I still have colleagues that have, funny enough, recently gave me a list of all the books she wrote. You know, some 250 books that she read. Sorry, not wrote, read. And I was thinking, well, I've read that many books on the subject because I wanted it to be authentic. And probably was also trying to find out what the psychosis was about, trying to validate the experience. I was looking for something.
What did you find?
More questions. I found so many questions. I drove myself nuts. I kept going round and round and round and round in circles. I really did give myself a headache for quite a long time. I wanted to prove that the experience was real. And it didn't matter where I looked, I couldn't find the answer because the answers was in here.
Yeah. Was it real?
I think, absolutely. I mean, it was my reality. There will be medical models will refer to it being as all sorts of things, but it was something that was beyond an experience that has a real answer, a real answer, a tangible answer. Today, one would talk about it as being a Kundalini experience, or one would find a language for it to make sense. An epiphany. I mean, there are many words.
An aha moment.
Yeah. I think the aha moment. That's I think the aha moment happens within a therapeutic setting where you actually connect two dots together and you go, okay, I get that. Whereas this was like, really? I think that the final, the bit that started to make sense for me was clearly life was going to change at some time, and I probably didn't know it, but I did have a pretty good idea of what life was going to look like up until I got to 40. I had this sense in my life that I knew there was a path. After 40, I didn't actually have any idea what I was going to look like. And I was always really curious as a kid laying in bed that I was going to be, and this is where people can do the maths, going to be 40 year 2000. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting, all those O's and numbers and new century and all that amazing thing. And of course, the construct that I had all fell apart. Got divorced, had to find a new way of life, had to understand that the construct that had been put in front of me was not one that I really wanted to live. And I met a new partner around that time. Wasn't the reason for the construct to fall apart. And she said, "Oh, you didn't have a breakdown in your 20s, you had a breakthrough." Okay, that makes sense, right? And maybe that was, even though I'd had some therapy and I looked for lots of different things, that sense of meaning meant quite a lot. And just we arrive at that aha moment, because that was an aha moment, in a very circuitous route. And that, I guess, led me to the, okay, well, so that happened. That was the spiritual part. And in order to bring that spiritual part into the world, I have to have my feet on the ground, which is what I had wanted to do anyway. But then started to educate myself around psychological and physiological awareness, so that I had a good grounding and teaching of mind, body, and spirit, so that they all had a real sense of integration, which they do.
So how does that manifest for you today?
I think I referred earlier to people that would come to the healer to want to be healed, and for messages. A lot of people go to a healer or a medium to hear from their mum or dad or aunt or uncle, whatever. Can they hear beyond this earthly coil that we live in, mortal coil? And that's not the work that I'm interested in, because I think that, well, there's all sorts of evidence around that. There's all sorts of dialogue and communication around that. I think that for me, this is school. Life, the whole of life is school. And we have ups and downs. We have good lessons. We have bad ones. We have a break. We have half terms. We have holidays. We have commitment. But at the end of the day, we're learning. And I don't want to sound like that's a sort of, teaching people in its own way. But actually, I think that's what it is. So it is for me. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. And now what I experience, that people will come and will be in some varying form of crisis and be looking for answers. And usually, if they find their way to my doorstep, for want of a better description, it's because they have something else within them that intuitively is saying, the doctors can do X and the therapists can do Y, but there's more, and I don't even have the language for it. So, maybe you can heal me. And I will support them and say, well, I can't heal you, but I can help you and support you and guide you. And we can talk about these things, and we can bring to life and find this connection, which I think is really interesting. And actually, I teach something really simple, and I'm going to sort of do it here and now, and that people who are watching can actually play with it for themselves. And that is, if you connect your hands in this form together, just bring them in a nice, simple, what does that feel like? It probably feels comfortable. It probably feels quite normal. It's something that you've probably done thousands of times, and unconsciously and consciously. And then I'm going to ask you to just shift one finger and then tell me what it feels like. Exactly. And what does it feel like in here? Yeah. And what's happening to your breathing, and what's happening in your mind. And now you're thinking and you're being curious, and all sorts of stuff's going on. So we want to go back to this. We go back to that. And that feels safe. And that feels okay. And that can eventually become like this. It can be very stuck. Yeah. And then, yeah. So I think that's the exploration. And I know that's a bit left field, but it is simple. But simple's hard.
Yeah, people often muddle simplicity with ease, and they're two very different things, aren't they? Simple isn't always easy.
Simple is to keep things. Yeah, I have a fascination in architecture. I love buildings and modern buildings, and you hear about how beautiful modern buildings can look so simple, but they are so complex to actually bring together, so that it has that almost perfect linear feel to it. And Moshe Feldenkrais wrote a book, which for years I thought, well, that's a lovely title, and it's called The Elusive Obvious. And it's a perfect title. Sometimes some things are so obvious, but you have to struggle in order to find it. And when you find it, whatever the it is for you, you go, it's back to the aha moment. It's back to that, oh God, that's so simple. But it wasn't. You had to struggle to find it. Almost to find some acceptance, I think.
Mm. Yeah, I've had a similar experience actually recently of the something that appeared once I figured it out to be so obvious and easy, yet I've spent a lifetime struggling to find. And as it's basically I believe I have recovered from binge eating disorder. I've discovered a method that works particularly well for me that's made it very easy. It's not a fight, and it's been a fight for 35 years. More than that actually, and so it feels like it can't even possibly be real because that's too simple. But I got so excited about it, I'm trying to tell other people because I'm like, oh, you just have to do this, it's just this thing. And it's not really working for them, and I realized that that's because it was the final piece of the puzzle rather than the whole puzzle.
Sure.
And so, if they've not got all of the pieces of the puzzle ready for the last one yet, then they're not quite at that point where that's going to be the bit that makes the picture come together.
When I first went to the healing center and I had my first experience of being, I will say now, I was 28 years old and I was in a teaching environment, although it wasn't a formal lesson teaching environment, it was a learning environment. I came out from the evening. I opened the window. Terrible thing to do, but I threw my cigarettes out the window and I never smoked again. And from then on, for about a year, I wanted to stand in speaker's corner and tell everybody what I'd found. I thought it was just like amazing. And why didn't everybody else know this? It was a moment. It was just another one of those moments where, and of course, nobody's listening because they're all doing their own thing and everybody's doing it their own way, and everybody will discover whatever they want to discover when they're ready. And that's how it is.
I'm glad that you went back to that time, because I was going to take you back to that time again anyway, because I meant to ask you and it slipped my mind. Talk to me about the people around you as you went through that transformation.
Well, there was family, there were friends, there were those that I had gathered through work experience. But actually, I think that I gathered, it's interesting you use that word, I think I gathered people around that I felt safe with, because I didn't feel safe for quite a long time. I felt that I had fallen off the track, and I was probably far more vulnerable than I realized for quite a long time, probably for a good 3 or 4 years. I would be careful what I would say. I didn't want to hurt anybody. Want to make sure that I was. I'd go around subjects in such a complicated and convoluted way that people didn't understand what the bloody hell I was talking about, and that was fine. What I realized was that I was making sure that I didn't give people ammunition that they could then throw back at me and hurt me, and that took a long time to understand that aspect of it. So the sense of being in that place and being vulnerable is something that I draw from, because when people are going through an event, whether it's death, divorce, ailments of whatever form, there is a level of vulnerability that needs protection, needs taking care of. So gathering the right people around is not always conscious. I think it's unconscious, but we all walk into a room and, well, no, we don't all. A lot of walk into a room and might stand in the corner and look around and check out who they want to have a conversation with, or rather. But some people just dive in the middle and see what happens. Depends where you are in life. It's that answer that question.
Yes, kind of. I think where I was getting at was that for some people, the struggle, they may have the intuition that something spiritual is required, that's like you had that intuition that there was something else and something intangible that you wanted to explore, and yet the people around them, either really or just in the head of the person wanting to explore, may not be in the same
Well, they wouldn't be.
Or
Yeah, they wouldn't be.
yeah,
That's the difficulty, is that something's not right. It's broken. It's twisted. It's out of kilter with those that are around. Often those that are around you may be the reason why you're in that place anyway. So it's hard. I think it's very hard to find, and there comes a point where one knows that one has to do something. So very often I will see people for the first time. It's not a guessing game, but it's an observation. It's a sense of getting to feel and sense who they are, what's going on, what are they looking for. And I don't think people, they're looking for answers, but the answers come in many different questions. They'll come in, am I eating right? Am I sleeping right? Am I exercising right? Do I have a practice? Am I still pissed off and angry with my grandmother for making me eat that cabbage at that time of the day, and I hate cabbage? And there's so many things that go on that it takes time for people to have a clear picture. I also think it depends on where somebody is within their journey, in their life journey. So it feels as though your questions are based about, well, what happens when someone comes to you? So there are people that I have been working with for 3, 4, 5 years. They're in a very different place.
Did you have at any point, because from what I understand, that getting from where you were when you had your event to where you were in a place to be able to find healing and understanding is about a 10-year process. Was that for you? Did I hear that right?
I think I'm still doing it.
Still on it, but the discovery of the energy work, the spirituality element.
Yeah, I think probably about 3 to 4 years. I think
was there anybody
after that,
through that time that didn't believe you?
I didn't tell a lot of people. I just did the work. I just went quietly and did it. I didn't make a fuss. I just wanted to do it. Embarrassment, humiliation, a sense of what? The link between the event and what happened and me going on this path. And it is quite well known. Some people do turn into go to a religious perspective and become very orthodox in their viewpoints. They have a meaning, and it's how they're translating their meaning. I didn't translate my meaning by becoming much more religious in that context, although I looked at it, but it didn't feel right. I contacted it and connected with it because I felt that I could help people to find their healing. I didn't really know why. I didn't understand what that was. It's taken a long time to really understand that.
I think that's one of the reasons I asked, because there's certain people in my life where if I speak to them about my spiritual beliefs, I sometimes just don't, because there is almost a shame attached to it because they don't believe or don't have the same experience. Sure. And I'm interested in where that shame comes from and why I can't be shameless about it. And I wondered if that was a similar experience that you maybe had or that others have, and if they get over that or not.
Well, I think there's two things in that. First of all, I think there is the getting used to it for oneself. So this is this sort of, am I in a cult? Am I suddenly have it's God speaking through me and I'm going, that potential, that sense of authenticity, that sense of what's really there, what's happening. I think it's part of the learning. It takes time. But whilst that's going on, there's going on over here is living in the world, living with family and going, don't be so ridiculous. And I remember talking to people early on and going, well, this is, when you're dead, that's it, forget it. What are you talking about? Just go and take some more pills. I mean, that's quite shocking for some people to feel. So I also think that there's a lot of fear for most people, the fear of the unknown and the confusion around a non-formal variation of living in the world, non-formal as in non-formal religion, because there's a structure, there's a community, there's a shared meaning. You can play around within the community, but there is this sense of you're all doing the same thing, therefore we're all right because we're all doing it and we're all believing in it, we're all right, and anybody else that isn't doing it.
I've heard something similar before. I've heard people say things about their religion, especially if they are members of a big religion, and that I have no problem with that. If that's what they believe and need, then, and I think people get a great deal of comfort and support from their religion. But I have heard this phrase, which is, well, if so many millions of people are doing it, they can't all be wrong.
Can I give you an answer to that?
If you have one, yeah.
Bah. I have always seen myself as being the salmon swimming upstream when all the other salmon are going in the opposite direction. It's just always been a feeling in my life, is that where are they all going? They're going that way, and it's that way. It's not that way, and it's not that they've already been there. The whole shoal is looking, and I think that there is this huge collective aspect that goes on, and that's fine. That's okay. We're all on a journey. I no idea where anybody else is on their journey, but at times when I meet, we connect and we interact, and you'll find out that people. It's not always people are on the same place. There isn't a level. There isn't anything. It's just you are where you're at.
So, how do you manage that when people come to you for help?
How do I manage which bit?
Where they're at, if it doesn't match where you're at. I assume it's better if it doesn't.
Well, it depends how we're meeting. So there are a few people that I am able to engage with in philosophical debates and psychological variations or spiritual aspects. In fact, I was on a walk this morning with a lady who has. So I got told off. She told me off this morning. A woman. I was with so it's interesting that I was with a woman this morning who has actually given some meditations on the Sanctuary's website, and we should come to that if that's okay. And we were talking about the benefits of meditation, the purpose of meditation, what one gets from it, and she teaches meditation and I don't. So I was sharing and listening and learning and explaining my views and feelings, and that's one type of meeting. When people come with a life event, then it's about listening and supporting and sharing my wisdom, sharing what I've learned and how to help them to be in themselves in a holistic approach of mind, body, and spirit. Take care of their mind. Some people can't get out of bed. Some people are grieving to a degree that they can't breathe, and they're missing their family so much, or whomever the loved one is, or pre or post an event whereby they've suddenly found out they have an illness, they have a potential terminal illness, and what that's about, or those that come after it and after they've had their treatment, and then they want to start to make meaning and get back to what was normal. How is that? So it's sharing and finding a way to enable someone to find their own inner peace and healing around that.
What extra do you bring to the table that they wouldn't be able to get from friends or family in that sense?
Yeah, I simply is that I am not friend or family, and they're in a position. I don't have any emotional attachment. The person can be themselves and be honest, And if they're not honest, then why aren't they being honest? Because what are they fooling themselves about? So that comes out quite, to place a space, any therapeutic space, doesn't matter what the therapy is, and my view on this bicycle wheel. So I have this bicycle wheel view. So we have this nice rubbery external, our skin and the body that bounces along and takes all the shock, and then we have the hard inner rim, our skeleton, etc. And then we have all the spokes that gets to the center of the wheel, the hub, the heart. And the spokes are the modalities. It could be a shiatsu massage or a spa day. But at the end of the day, the person needs taking some responsibility to find what it is from the outside world to get into the inside world. And that's what I feel is my role, to help them to find some aspect of that. Part of their journey. I'm only going to be a part of their journey. I don't have the answers. I just help them to find the bits so that they can live a life of meaning and make sense of the confusion.
Is that what energy healing means to you, or is that something additional or extra or different?
COVID created a phenomenal change for the whole world. I know that's an obvious statement, and the whole world is scrambling, trying to get back to its old ways in a new way. And the conversation of COVID has almost disappeared out of the world. However, I think it was a phenomenal moment of change for society and for human beings. And it brought energy healing into my lexicon in a way that I had not really understood in the same way as I had understood healing work to be. So the classic healing was known as the laying of hands. The power of touch is phenomenal. For people people hug trees because they get an energy from a tree. People hug their family because they get a sense of. And we've all hugged people that are shallow, narrow, thin, large, small, round. But at the end of the day, it's about the energy. You're gaining something. And I'm sure if most people were to notice what it is that they're hugging, not just a person, but not just the flesh and bone, but actually feeling what they're hugging, they'll feel a level of real connection. And that's an energy. It's a sense of feeling something that's going on. COVID stopped us touching people as healers. We couldn't get anywhere near anybody. And I was responsible at the time for the healing space where people would come. And suddenly all these people that were regularly coming for healing were just left out in the cold. Not literally, they were in their homes, they were unavailable, nobody could go anywhere near them, and a lot of mental health issues that were difficult for people to deal with. We know that, but the same for people that were living alone, same for people that were having treatments whereby they needed touch and contact, and were on a journey of healing of some form or another. So we set up the sanctuary website. We gave it a new iteration, probably sanctuary website V1 2.1, I think it was, and we started engaging using Zoom by having this type of conversation. How are you doing? Really, as a sense of knowing that people were not alone, that we were there thinking of them, supporting them. We, as in the healers, some preferred to work online and some were happy just to make telephone calls. But what started to take place was this real awareness of, actually, when you pass the bit about, well, how are you doing, and that type of polite questioning, well, take a breath, just take a moment, just let's stop. Tell me, how are you feeling in yourself? starting to get people to breathe more, to just start to connect, that within their space, within their home, within their environment, there was a connection. And then the connection started to become a lot more energetic, this sense that I was experiencing a bubble that we were in. It's almost as though we were outside of the space that the Zoom and the room was actually taking us. We were creating a bubble. And I can almost feel that sort of, as I'm talking about it, there's a little bit that you and I are creating that space now. Energy, I love Albert Einstein's comment, and he did a lot of work around energetic work, not just about E = mc squared, but he actually talked about energy. And what he said, one day all our healing, all our medicine will be vibrational medicine. So I suddenly started getting interested in quantum physics and couldn't understand a bloody word they were talking about, but I understood the basic principles.
Don't get me started on string theory.
We're at a molecular cellular level. We're all connected. And they started looking at all the interesting information about water and sound baths, and there's so much at a vibrational level that's taking place that we have yet to really understand and discover. And science is over there, and medicine is over there, and healing is over there, and we're over here. It's coming together. Okay. So we started to run some energy balancing therapy courses, actually talking about it, engaging in it, experiencing it. And I became converted to that difference, that there is touch work, very valuable, very beneficial. There is psychological work, valuable and beneficial. There is physical work, and there's also an energetic work. And it's almost like a fifth element, another part of how we connect as human beings fully and really be within ourselves. So we're facilitating that, and I've noticed in the touch work with people, you can really feel that energy moving around their bodies in a way that, was at first is like, can you feel that? I go, yeah. So are you pulling my leg? Not in the joke version. No, my hand's just resting above. Yeah, but I can feel my leg getting longer. I've had enough experiences with people to know that I can ask the question. Sometimes they go, no, don't feel that. That's okay. No problem. I can feel it, but they may not be able to. I'm sensing an awareness. It's just getting people to become more aware and connect and engage.
So in his 20s, Craig, and anybody else who's currently in a similar situation, what's your message of hope?
Oh yeah. Trust that the journey will unfold. Be curious. I think that's probably one of the best words that I found for myself, is I'm curious. I'm curious in too many things. It gets me into trouble. I sort of find myself, the fine line between going down a rabbit hole. A very, very good friend called Claire pointed me in the direction of being polymath and interested in other things. Just trust, be curious, allow things to unfold. You have much more. You have the best answers for yourself. We will always will, but we so often, and I think it's a transgenerational. That the role of the doctor, the priest, the teacher, the professor. They're all those people that are in the roles that my parents' generation would go to have the answers because they were educated and they knew. But it's absolutely clear over the last 40, 50 years that actually our life and our journey is in our hands. It's up to us to go find it. And there'll be bumps on the way. There'll be sleeping policemen and potholes, and there'll be mountains and there'll be valleys. But in the metaphor, trust in yourself. I wish I had more of that for myself in that early period of time. I would I would probably not have spent so much time doing things that I didn't really want to do. But I did them because I thought I ought to do them. That's okay. I'm doing them now.
Craig, thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.